Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
It started with a phone call that should have felt like nothing. My mother's voice, light and sweet, the same tone she used when I was 8, and she asked me to let Claire go first at blowing out the birthday candles, even though it was my birthday. Emily, she said, I wanted to talk about the bridal shower. Just a quick thing, don't get upset. Which is mom code for, you're not going to like this, but I expect you to swallow it with a smile. I sat on the edge of the bed with the phone pressed to my ear, half listening to Mark laughing at something on TV in the other room. It was supposed to be a casual weeknight, the kind where you feel like your life is finally lining up the way it should. We were a month out from the wedding. Everything was planned. The guest list was locked. My dress was hanging in the spare room like a holy relic. And this shower, my shower, was supposed to be the start of it all. Don't wear white, she said. I blinked. What? To the shower, honey. Maybe wear something soft. A blush or a pastel. You always look lovely in lavender. I waited, thinking maybe she was joking. She wasn't. Mom, it's my bridal shower. I know, sweetheart, but Claire's going through a rough time. It's been hard for her. You know how she is? She feels so behind. You wearing white might just rub it in. It's not fair to her. That word, fair, burned a little more than I expected. Not because of the request itself. I've let plenty of things go for Claire. Hell, I've given her more slack than a boat anchor. But to be told that me wearing white to my own shower was somehow unfair to the sister who wasn't even getting married, that hit different. Still, I said what I've said all my life. Fine, it's just a dress. Because that's how it always went. Claire cried, Mom explained, and I adjusted. She was the sensitive one, the creative spirit, the one who felt things deeper. Meanwhile, I was the solid one, the problem solver, the one who didn't need as much attention. I learned to take up less space because she didn't know how to take up just hers. I wore a pale blue wrap dress to the shower. It was nice, classy, not bridal, but fine. The venue was a sweet little converted barn just outside of town. All wildflowers and mason jars, and expensive appetizers no one ate. I walked in smiling, expecting to feel some warmth, some attention, a little celebration maybe. Instead, I walked into a Claire showcase. She was in white, of course she was. A strapless white cocktail dress with a slit that belonged on the Vegas Strip. Not at someone else's bridal shower. Mom didn't say a word about it, just gushed over how confident she looked. My aunt leaned over to whisper, "Isn't that a little bold?" And Mom shushed her like a toddler being told to hush during church. The first 20 minutes were tolerable. People hugged me, congratulated me, asked about the honeymoon. But even then, Claire was orbiting close, louder than necessary, dropping hints about her new project, which turned out to be a one-woman cabaret show about, and I quote, a woman struggling in her sister's shadow. I should have seen it coming. The attention shift, the spotlight migration. When it came time for my toast, I stood at the front of the room holding a glass of Prosecco, heart full, ready to say something about family, gratitude. I had written notes, but they felt small in that moment, so I folded them into my palm and just spoke from the chest. I thanked everyone. I thanked my mother, despite everything. I thanked Claire too, because that's what you do. Then, just as I lifted my glass to say the final line, a familiar voice called out from the back. Wait, before you finish, I have something. Claire was standing with a mic. I hadn't even noticed there was a mic. Mom clapped. Go on, honey, do it. There was no going back. Claire walked to the center and launched into a monologue. Not a short, sweet toast. A monologue, memorized, rehearsed. Something about sisters and timing and how life doesn't always give you the spotlight. You have to take it. Then she sang, a song from her upcoming show. The room went dead silent. And then the tears started. Not for me. People were crying, sniffling, touched. I stood to the side like an extra in my own production, glass still in hand, wondering if I'd been hallucinating the whole concept of this being my day. By the time she was done, Mom was sobbing into a napkin. That was beautiful, Claire. Just beautiful, so brave. And me, I smiled, because that's what I do. When it was over and people were gathering coats and clinking the last of the champagne flutes, Claire walked up to me with this big, wide grin like we'd just shared a moment of sisterly magic. "Wasn't that amazing?" she said. "I think people really needed to hear it." I said, "Yeah, real showstopper." She didn't hear the sting, or maybe she did and chose to ignore it like she always did. The applause was still echoing in her ears. My mother kissed me goodnight like she was proud of us both. And that night, lying next to Mark in bed, he asked me how it went. I said, "Fine," then turned away and didn't sleep a minute. Because deep down, I knew something had shifted. Something inside me had stopped bending. I hadn't said a word, but I would. Just not yet. And when I finally did, no one would see it coming. People always talk about family like it's this sacred bond, like blood ties mean loyalty and fairness and unconditional love. But when you grow up in a house where one child is made of glass and the other is made of steel, you learn fast that unconditional love has conditions, and some of them aren't written down. I used to think I was lucky to be the strong one. I wore that badge like armor, but strength in our family meant silence. It meant making room. It meant stepping aside so someone else could shine, even if that meant dimming your own light until you couldn't see straight. The thing about Claire is, she was never actually the villain, not on the surface. She was fragile, sure, but charming in the way that made grown-ups lean down and tell her she was special. She cried at school plays when she forgot her lines. She had big feelings that meant if she didn't like dinner, my mom made a whole new meal. When she wanted to quit piano lessons, she did. When I wanted to quit swim team because I hated the coach, my mother said, "You committed. You finish what you start." And I did, always. I finished everything I ever started, even when it left me exhausted, even when it made me hate the process. I graduated early, got a job while Claire was still bouncing between community theater gigs and coffee shops that let her hang up flyers about her next reading. I paid for my own apartment. I fixed the leaking faucet in Mom's house when Dad left. I showed up. I showed up for everything, and Claire showed up when she felt like it. And when she didn't, Mom made excuses for her. She's just sensitive. She doesn't cope like you do. You know how it is with creative people. They feel things differently. But feelings, as far as I could tell, didn't excuse theft. And I don't mean theft in the criminal sense. I mean emotional theft. Stealing the air from a room, the moment from a person, the light from your eyes when it was supposed to be your time. And after the bridal shower, it wasn't just a feeling, it was a fact. She had taken what was mine, my voice, my day, and used it as a backdrop for her drama. I tried to explain this to Mark, and God bless him, he tried to understand. We were sitting in the kitchen the following evening, him pouring bourbon over a giant ice cube, like he always did when he needed to listen without interrupting. I told him everything. How I didn't wear white because Mom asked me not to. How Claire hijacked my toast with a monologue and a song. How everyone applauded her like she was the bride. And when I was done talking, he took a slow sip and said, "That sucks, but maybe she just wanted to feel included." I stared at him like he'd missed the entire point. "Mark, it was my shower." "I know," he said gently, setting the glass down. "But maybe it wasn't about stealing your thunder. Maybe she thought it was her way of celebrating you." That's the thing with people who've never dealt with emotional landmines. They assume it's all a misunderstanding. They don't see the years of tiny cuts, the pattern of being sidelined, the way someone can slice your skin open with a smile and a stage voice. Later that night, as I was folding laundry, I got a text from my mom. Just one sentence. "Claire's thinking of doing something at the reception. Wouldn't that be fun?" I stared at it for a full minute before typing back. "What kind of something?" Her reply came with 3 exclamation points. "Like a little speech, or a reading, maybe even a short performance. A performance at my wedding. Like the shower wasn't enough." Like the 100-person guest list and the 5-figure catering and the hand-picked song list weren't enough already. I dropped the phone onto the laundry basket and walked straight out to the porch, barefoot, still holding a pair of socks. The cold wood under my feet was the only thing grounding me. I thought back to Claire's senior year of high school. When she didn't get the lead in the fall play, she cried for a week. Mom called the drama teacher and asked if they could add a second lead. They did. The whole show was rewritten so Claire wouldn't be heartbroken. I was a junior then, stage crew, paintbrush in hand, overhearing the whispers about how lucky she is her mom has pull. I never had pull. I just had grit. And people don't throw parties for grit. They expect it. They praise it with one hand while overloading it with more weight using the other. And now I was seeing it so clearly how every single event in my life somehow became a Claire event. My graduation dinner turned into a celebration for her getting into that acting workshop. My job promotion brunch was interrupted by Claire's announcement that she was maybe moving to LA. Even my engagement dinner ended with Claire playing a funny little improv at the table, complete with voices, while my ring barely got a glance. It was never funny, it was exhausting, and I was tired of being the background to someone else's act. I called Aunt Linda the next morning. She was my dad's sister and always had more bite than sugar, which made her dangerous at family functions but refreshing when you needed someone to tell the truth. I told her everything. Her voice crackled with static and rage. Your mother's lost her damn mind. A performance? At your wedding? Emily, honey, that's not a family, it's a goddamn circus. I laughed, and it felt good. It felt like a muscle I hadn't used in weeks. You planning to let that happen? She asked. Her tone suddenly quiet. I paused. I don't know. Well, you better figure it out. 'Cause if you don't stop the show now, she'll take the whole stage. I hung up the phone and stared out the kitchen window. A crow landed on the fence, watching me like it knew something. Maybe it did. And somewhere deep inside me, a door creaked open. A door that had been bolted shut by decades of patience. I wasn't sure what I'd do yet. But for the first time, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let her take my wedding. Not this time. There's a strange kind of stillness that follows humiliation, a silence that settles in your bones, not because you've been defeated loudly, but because you've been ignored so thoroughly that it feels like you've disappeared altogether. After the bridal shower fiasco, I kept moving through my days like nothing had happened, smiling at work when coworkers asked how the shower went, nodding politely when someone told me they saw the photos and, "Didn't your sister look stunning?" I nodded so much that my neck ached by Thursday, and I realized then that this erasure wasn't new. It had been my companion since childhood, cloaked in politeness and family loyalty. The weekend after the shower, I found myself avoiding calls. I left my phone on silent, let the texts pile up, and instead spent a full afternoon organizing our kitchen pantry, labeling jars of quinoa and rice like it would somehow organize my spinning mind. Mark noticed I was quieter than usual, but he didn't push. He never did. He assumed I was just overwhelmed, maybe a little stressed with the wedding so close. And maybe part of me wanted him to keep assuming, because explaining the emotional minefield of being constantly overshadowed wasn't something you could wrap up in a neat conversation. It wasn't just about Claire's performance at the shower. It was everything that came before it, everything that piled on top of it. Layer by layer, year after year. But then just as I began to breathe again, just as I convinced myself that maybe the worst of it was over, the final blow came. My mom, ever the master of timing, called me on Monday morning while I was driving to work. I answered with Bluetooth, trying to keep my voice light even though my stomach tightened the second her name flashed on the screen. Hey Mom, what's up? Oh, nothing urgent, sweetheart. I just wanted to touch base about the reception schedule. I let out a slow breath, keeping my tone measured. Okay. Well, Claire's been working on something special. You know how emotional she gets at weddings, and she just wants to contribute something meaningful. She was thinking of doing a little speech, or maybe a reading. She even found this beautiful piece about sisters and letting go. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. At the reception? Yes, just a few minutes, and she promised it won't be dramatic. I told her it needed to be classy and appropriate, and she completely agreed. That was a lie, and we both knew it. Claire didn't do appropriate. Claire did Claire. And now, after hijacking my bridal shower with a surprise performance, she wanted stage time at my wedding. Like she was the opening act, and I was just the feature. I didn't answer right away, and Mom filled the silence the way she always did, by making me feel like the problem. Emily, honey, don't look at it like she's taking something away from you. She just wants to feel connected. You know how much she looks up to you. That line, always that line. She looks up to you. As if adoration were a license to steal moments and call it love. I stared at the road, blinking against the sudden pressure in my throat. Can I think about it? I finally said, my voice hoarse. Of course, but it would mean a lot to her, and to me. She hung up before I could change my mind. And with that, the message was clear. Claire would perform again, because she always did. And my role, as usual, was to be gracious. Smile, applaud, disappear just a little more. That evening, I sat on the living room floor with a stack of reception place cards, writing names in gold ink, trying not to think about how many of those people would show up expecting a show, and not mine. Mark sat beside me, sipping tea, watching me scribble with a quiet tension that finally broke. You okay? He asked. Not like someone prying, but like someone trying. I think I want to cancel the reception speech portion, I said, not looking up. No toasts, no readings, just music and food. He hesitated. Because of Claire? I nodded once. I get it, he said. But is that what you really want? Or is that what you need to do to avoid a scene? That question landed harder than I expected. Was I cutting out speeches because I truly wanted a quiet celebration? Or was I just tired of competing? Tired of holding the mic only to hand it off again? I didn't answer him. I just kept writing names. And later, when the cards were all done, I tucked one into the bottom of the box. Claire Whitmore, table 4, front row, right beside my mother. It should have ended there. I should have swallowed the bitterness and let the wedding pass with minimal drama. But fate had one more punch for me, and it came during the rehearsal dinner. The venue was beautiful, the food was perfect, and everything felt just slightly surreal, like I was walking through a dream where nothing could go wrong. But halfway through dessert, Claire stood up with a glass of wine and clinked her spoon against it. Can I say something? She asked. Though she didn't wait for an answer. She launched into what was supposed to be a toast, but quickly turned into a meandering monologue about love being hard. How watching your older sister get married while you're still figuring things out is both beautiful and painful. She talked about feeling left behind, about how family isn't just about shared blood but shared stories, and how she hoped to one day be as brave as I was for choosing forever with someone. People clapped, some teared up, and me? I sat there frozen, smiling tightly. While my dessert melted untouched in front of me, she had done it again. Another stage, another spotlight, another moment that should have been mine, but was rewritten as her therapy session. Aunt Linda leaned over, muttered under her breath. One more scene and I'm bringing a fire hose to the reception. And I smiled, really smiled for the first time in weeks, because something inside me clicked. I didn't need to fight her anymore. I didn't need to argue or plead or ask my mother for protection. I didn't need a dramatic confrontation. I needed a plan. And as I sipped my lukewarm wine, I knew exactly where Claire's seat card would go. Nowhere. The day before the wedding should feel like the calm before the celebration. A moment to breathe before the orchestra swells and the curtain lifts. Instead, I woke up with a pounding in my chest and 1,000 bees buzzing behind my forehead. None of them letting me rest. All of them reminding me that something was off, tilted, wrong in a way that no amount of lavender candles or rehearsal run-throughs could fix. The air in our house felt heavy, and even though Mark was humming as he made coffee in the kitchen, that cheerful sound only made the weight in my gut settle deeper. He was happy, he was ready, and I was bracing for impact. The rehearsal dinner was being held at a private room in a historic inn just outside the city, a beautiful stone-walled space filled with candlelight, dark wood, and fresh peonies flown in from a florist who charged like she was selling endangered artifacts. My planner had taken care of every detail, right down to the calligraphed menus on thick cream cardstock. And for a few fleeting minutes as we arrived and I looked around at the warm faces of friends and family, I felt like maybe, just maybe, it would all come together without disaster. But then Claire walked in. She was late, naturally. She swept through the doors like she owned the place, trailing drama in her wake, wearing a plunging satin dress that shimmered like she was headed to a movie premiere and not her sister's rehearsal dinner. On her arm was a man no one recognized, and he looked about 25 with a camera bag slung over his shoulder and a distracted smirk on his face like he wasn't quite sure why he was there. My mother gasped, not in dismay but in delight, and made a beeline for them. "Claire, sweetheart, you made it, and who's this?" "This is Evan," Claire said, drawing the word out like it was a performance in itself. "He's working on a documentary project, and I thought it would be amazing if he captured some behind-the-scenes stuff from the wedding weekend. You know, like an artsy little piece about love and family and all that." My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might pass out. I stepped forward, keeping my voice low but clear. "Claire, no one approved a documentary. We already have a photographer and a videographer." She shrugged like it was no big deal. "Oh, he's not official. He's just capturing the vibes. Totally low-key. I told him to be discreet." Mark raised an eyebrow from across the room. I could tell he didn't want to get involved, but his face said everything. This was not okay. "Claire," I said again, more firmly this time, "this is a private family event, not your film set." But before she could answer, my mother swooped in again, laughing like I was just being overly stressed. "Let her have her little project, Emily. It's not hurting anyone. You always get so serious. This is supposed to be fun." There it was, the classic pivot. I was the problem, the serious one. The one who couldn't take a joke, couldn't loosen up, couldn't share the stage even for a moment. I felt something harden inside me then. Not anger, not even sadness, but a resolve that went beyond anything I'd ever known. Dinner went on. We ate, people laughed, toasts were given. I tried to smile, to listen, to engage, but all I could feel was that camera in the corner, Evan pretending not to film, while Claire struck poses and whispered commentary into his lens. Every time someone stood to give a speech, she leaned forward like she might jump in, and I saw my mother glance at her more than once like waiting for her to take over. I sat next to Mark, his hand occasionally brushing mine, grounding me, but I didn't speak much. Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because the words I wanted to say weren't the kind you say in public. Claire stood again toward the end of the evening, raising her glass once more. "To Emily," she said, voice dripping with that performative sincerity she'd perfected since childhood. "For being brave enough to commit to love in a world that's so chaotic. I hope I find that kind of courage someday." It was less of a toast and more of a performance piece, a backhanded compliment wrapped in glitter and guilt. People clapped because they didn't know what else to do. My mother clapped too, tears in her eyes like Claire had just delivered a eulogy for a country. I didn't clap, I didn't speak, I didn't look at her. But when the final fork scraped across the last dessert plate and the room began to thin out, I slipped away to the side hallway and pulled out my phone. My heart was thudding, but my hand didn't shake. I typed a name into my contacts. Trish, the coordinator for the reception staff. I hit call. "Hey, it's Emily Whitmore," I said, calm and direct. "I need to make a change to the reception staff list." She sounded surprised. "Sure, of course. What do you need?" "There's an additional position I'd like filled," I said. "Coat check, single-person coverage, just for the first few hours until dinner is underway." "Got it. Do you have someone in mind?" I paused. "Yes, Claire Whitmore. She'll be arriving early anyway. She can help with guest flow, make sure coats are tagged and handled." There was a beat of silence on the other end. "Is she part of the staff?" "No," I said evenly, "but she will be for the evening. Trish cleared her throat. Understood. I'll update the list. I hung up and stood there in that quiet hallway for a long time, watching the shadows stretch along the stone wall, the flickering light of the antique sconces bouncing off polished floors. My reflection in the glass of a framed painting looked still, composed, but I could feel something seismic shifting underneath. This wasn't rage. It wasn't even revenge, not in the screaming, tear-filled soap opera kind of way. It was a correction, a redirection of the spotlight, a reminder she had turned my shower into her debut. She had turned my wedding into a set. She had spoken over my moments with practiced pain and curated charm. And now, for once, I was going to rewrite the script. The dinner ended. The guests hugged and laughed and piled into their cars. Claire blew me a kiss from across the lot and mouthed, "Love you," like nothing had happened. Like we were just two sisters sharing a magical weekend of memories. And I waved back, smiling softly. Because tomorrow, for the first time, Claire would have a role to play that she didn't write. And she'd have to stand through it every second while the rest of us took our seats. Weddings are supposed to be a climax, the joyful crescendo of months of planning, years of waiting, and a lifetime of imagining how it might all look and feel when your moment finally comes. But when I woke up that morning, I didn't feel excitement. I didn't feel dread either. I felt still, eerily so, like the air had gone quiet before a long-delayed storm. My body moved automatically, rising before the alarm, brushing my teeth while the light from the window crept slowly across the tiled bathroom floor. Mark was still asleep, his arms stretched toward my side of the bed like a reflex he didn't know he had. And I stood there for a moment just looking at him, trying to absorb the last peaceful second before everything shifted. Not just because I was getting married, but because I was finally, for the first time in my life, going to take back something that had always been handed away without my permission. The venue looked breathtaking. Rows of chairs lined up under an arch of soft greenery and pale florals, warm spring sunlight spilling across the grass like something out of a dream. Everything looked exactly the way I had pictured it. Every candle placed, every ribbon tied, every name carefully scripted on little pieces of folded cardstock that waited patiently to guide people to their assigned places. But as the early guests began to arrive, and the gentle chaos of a wedding morning unfolded around me, I could feel my pulse rising. Not because I was nervous to say I do, not because of cold feet or performance jitters, but because I was waiting for the moment that would separate the past from everything that would come next. Claire arrived just after the photographers had started taking pre-ceremony shots, gliding into the building with the same energy she brought to every room, a forceful, attention-seeking orbit that somehow pulled every eye toward her as though gravity had rewritten itself just for her entrance. She was wearing white, not off-white, not cream, pure, gleaming, blinding white. The dress was short, glittering at the hem, with a plunging neckline and sleeves made of sheer lace that clung to her arms like vines. It was not subtle, it was not bridal party appropriate. It was not anything except an intentional middle finger wrapped in satin and shimmer. My mother gasped, not with disapproval but admiration, and immediately hurried to greet her, arms flung wide like they hadn't spoken only an hour earlier. "Claire, you look stunning," she said, eyes shining as though her daughter had just arrived on a red carpet instead of the threshold of someone else's wedding. I stood across the room, watching them embrace, feeling something deep and familiar stir in my chest. Not jealousy, not exactly, just the cold, tired recognition of a pattern that had repeated itself so many times it had worn grooves into my sense of self. I didn't interrupt, I didn't march over. I simply turned and gave a nod to Trish, who stood beside the entryway with the clipboard and headset that signaled she was the person who made everything happen. Claire spotted me, beaming, and crossed the room in heels that clicked like applause with every step. This place looks amazing. Oh my God, I can't believe it's really happening." She threw her arms around me in a hug I didn't return. "You're glowing." I smiled tightly, just enough to be polite. Glad you made it on time. She pulled back, tilting her head in that dramatic, affected way she had perfected over years of playing the wayfish, misunderstood sister. Well, obviously, wouldn't miss your big day. I mean, who would play emotional support if I didn't show up? Trish stepped forward then, clearing her throat gently. Claire Whitmore? Claire blinked, confused. Yes? I have you down to help with coat check, Trish said smoothly, pointing to a small table at the far end of the entryway, where a neatly printed sign read, Coat check, in gold script, and a stack of numbered tags sat waiting. Claire looked at me, then back at Trish, and let out a laugh. Oh no, there must be some mistake. I'm not staff. I'm the sister of the bride. No mistake, I said, still smiling. We had a last-minute staffing issue, and you're always saying how much you want to help. This is your way to contribute. It's just for the first hour. After that, we'll be seated. She stared at me, her face frozen in something between horror and disbelief, and I could see her calculating whether to make a scene. For the first time, the room didn't revolve around her. People were walking in. Guests were handing her coats. Someone handed her a vintage suede jacket and looked at her expectantly. She reached for a tag without speaking. The ceremony began without incident. Mark looked at me like I was the only thing that mattered, and when I walked down the aisle, all the weight I'd carried for years felt like it had finally lifted. Just enough for me to breathe. I said my vows, he said his. We kissed, and the applause was real. It wasn't for a performance. It was for us. When we moved into the reception hall, the music started, the wine flowed, and people found their seats, guided by those carefully written cards. Every table was full, except one. A small place in the front corner, beside my mother's seat, sat conspicuously empty. Claire never found her name, because it wasn't there. Eventually, she drifted into the hall, trying to blend into conversations, acting as though nothing had happened, laughing a little too loudly, staying close to the bar. My mother pulled me aside, eyes sharp, voice low. What did you do? I looked at her, steady and calm. I gave her a job, something useful, something that didn't involve stealing the microphone. She's humiliated, my mother hissed. No, I said, she's just not the main character for once. There's a difference. My mother stared at me like she didn't recognize me, and maybe she didn't. Maybe for the first time, she was seeing the version of me that had stopped apologizing for existing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm out. I simply returned to my table, took a sip of champagne, and smiled at the man beside me, the one who had loved me through every high and every low and never once asked me to shrink. Later that night, as the lights dimmed and the band played the final song, Claire approached me one last time. She didn't say anything at first, just stood there, looking both furious and broken, like she couldn't decide whether to cry or scream or laugh it off. I waited. You didn't give me a seat, she finally whispered. You gave yourself mine, I answered, more than once. And then I walked away, leaving her there in the glow of a chandelier that, for once, wasn't hers to stand under. Because I didn't take her spotlight, I just stopped giving her mine.